Great. Sorry for the slight delay in getting to you, but I'm glad to say that we're ready to start this session, looking really at the digital dimensions of human trafficking, thinking about the emerging threats, some of the innovations, and also global responses. I'm Chris van Stolk. I'm your moderator. I'm from RAND Europe. We've done a lot of work around human trafficking, but more importantly, we're joined here by an esteemed panel. I will introduce each one of them in a second. But really first, as a way of introduction, I think human trafficking is a really difficult policy challenge that we face globally. It affects millions of people. Human trafficking as a concept also encompasses multiple different dimensions. We can think about sexual exploitation, forced labor, forced marriage, modern slavery, child trafficking, migrant smuggling. We're all familiar with these kind of concepts, and they all overlap. I just wanted to say that if we're thinking about modern slavery, for instance, 50 million people are trapped in modern slavery, the estimates say around the globe. And 28 million are in forced labor, and 22 million are in forced marriage out of that. And 1/8 of those who are affected by modern slavery are children. So that shows you some of the challenges that we have. And of course, there's a really important interface as well with conflict, something that we've talked a lot about at this forum, and also climate change, because places are evolving around the world. That leads to more human mobility and, of course, the opportunity to exploit these kind of trends. So if we're then thinking about digital transformation and digital innovations, you can see that there are risks and opportunities there. The risks are really about some of these technologies can be exploited to actually facilitate human trafficking. But on the plus side, there are also opportunities to use these new technologies to mitigate against some of the things that are happening. So I'm here with a very esteemed panel. You won't be hearing as much from me, but really from our guests next to me. And directly next to me is His Excellency Anil Jayantha Fernando, who's the Minister of Labor for the Republic of Sri Lanka. Welcome. Next to him is Her Excellency Najwa Al-Thani, who's the Undersecretary at the Ministry of Labor of the State of Qatar, but also the General Secretary for the National Committee for Combating Human Trafficking. Welcome to you. Next to the Undersecretary is Esther Maina from the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of the Republic of Kenya. And Esther has reliably informed me that she has 29 years of experience, so can talk about the complexities of the situation in Kenya. And then finally, but not least, we have Thier, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Lapis Group, has a lot of experience around technology and this issue. So first, I wanted to come to His Excellency, the Minister next to me, and talk a little bit about the situation in Sri Lanka, some of the challenges that you face with regards to this topic, and also what you're doing about it in terms of the national strategy that you might have in place.
Thank you very much. Of course, when we take labor and just take the current situation, the local level and the global level, in a society where the technology also has developed, we have not been able to very freely mobilize the labor throughout the world. So that should have been there if the benefits of technology has been properly passed to the people. However, now we talk about this issue, the digital and the technological dimension in labor trafficking. It's a kind of paradox. Why? On the one hand, technology has not been able to do what I just mentioned, the labor mobility. And on the other hand, the technology has created lots of avenues for this trafficking and the forced labor and issues where that questions the humanity and the supremacy of labor. If you look at Sri Lanka being an island, so naturally, it's just within the crossroad of the navigation and all, it's automatically exposed to this particular risk to great extent. But on the other hand, the country's situation, before we formed the government last year, country's economy was almost just collapsed and we had just expressed unilaterally bankrupt the country. Now we have stabilized the country and just moving forward. So when people are desperate, so automatically there is an internal tendency for you to do something. In such a situation, so technological avenues or any other forces could easily stimulate those desperate people to find avenues. So this is how, to great extent, unknowingly, even though we have lots of awareness campaign and even legal, the enforcement, all those things are there. But innocent people, poor people, just take a risk and just thinking that we will have luxury in case. What just came to my mind when we talk about this thing, the theme of the famous TV series Squid Game. So it is easy for you to play with the people when they are really desperate. So from Sri Lankan side, we have taken lots of measures. For Employment Bureau and National Human Anti-Trafficking Task Force, Criminal Investigation Department, and the other digital agencies. So different agencies are there. We are trying hard. But still we see that the legal enforcement, awareness campaign, and all those things, even regional and global cooperation, will not themselves solve this problem. We need to go beyond maybe the global cooperation. And sometimes I propose we need to go to the root cause of this issue. To some extent, it is connected to the social justice. We live in injustice. The society. That could be the reason, I suppose, the Doha Forum had taken justice in action beyond promises to the progress. So I think this is a relevant the topic, and the theme is also well relevant. But at this level, we'll see how best until we reach kind of long-lasting solution to overcome this particular issue, we find a solution and cooperate and collaborate with national and regional international organizations.
Thank you very much for that statement. I just wanted to come to Undersecretary Al-Thani. Of course, you're predominantly a receiving country in terms of migrant labor, very reliant on migrant labor, similar to all the other Gulf countries. So what is happening in this space within the Gulf countries to actually address this issue, and particularly in the state of Qatar? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the cooperation that His Excellency sort of mentioned in terms of actually addressing this issue.
For sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Christian, and we thank the Doha Forum team that allow us to have this conversation on such a heavy but important topic. And so when it comes with the general national strategy that we have towards combating human trafficking, we recognize that it changes the way, the form, the approaches that different traffickers have, what victims look like. All of these things change and are rapidly changing in the last few years. So we, from the beginning, insisted to have short-term and agile strategies to combat it and always monitor and explore what more can be done in the changing colors of this heinous crime. The state of Qatar believes that combating human trafficking comes from our core principle of human dignity and protecting individuals, peace and security, and ensuring that everyone's rights are protected no matter where they come from. As you rightfully mentioned, we are mostly a receiving country of labor, a country of destination, if you may. And so we work heavily with the different partners from other national agencies to ensure that we cover all elements that might be potential markers for human trafficking. But we also work with countries of origin, like Sri Lanka, like Kenya, which we have two representatives in this panel speaking as well, but also many international organizations and groups. We approach our national strategy or national action plan for the year 24 to 26 under the core belief in the four principles of prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnerships, which is a very, very big and important one as well. These are on a national level. Our committee is comprised of the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the public prosecutors, the Supreme Judicial Council, civil society organizations, the Ministry of Interior, covering really all aspects. The very appropriate inclusion of artificial intelligence or technologies in the topic and theme of this panel is not something that we take lightly. We believe that technology can be a very powerful ally to help us combat this crime, but it can also be a dangerous enabler that helps traffickers become not only smarter about how they approach things, but quickly develop their strategies and tools. And I'm not going to get too much into it. I know we're going to go into it in the rest of the panel. But all of the work that we do independently as a state of Qatar or with our partners is to try to leverage on opportunities or things that offer us tools to undertake our work in a more effective manner, but also be cautious towards some of the adverse impacts that might come from this. We heavily rely on data collection and data analysis. I think last week or about 10 days ago, we participated in the high-level appraisal in the United Nations for the Global Action Plan on Combating Human Trafficking. And one of the things that we insisted on ensuring is that more needs to be done in the field of data sharing and data gathering and intelligence analysis to ensure that we can see markers before the crime occurs. By its very nature, this is not a localized crime. The whole concept of human trafficking has to have an element of, granted there are much larger countries that would have it within their territory, but it always has a movement of an element of movement. And therefore it requires a collaboration across different agencies, different countries, to ensure that we all cover our territories, share the intelligence that can help us better identify and prevent those cases. But also to insist on having a victim-based approach, a human rights-based approach towards them. His Excellency mentioned briefly that if you solve some of the core social issues and provide a level of social justice, then you are hitting at the root causes of all of this. Artificial intelligence can support not only in identifying but also proposing solutions for this. But that very much is kind of the dual approach that we take here. We try to support in a lot of different countries through our Qatar Fund for Development, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and some of the efforts that they're doing to support different countries and support different areas to have greater social justice so that victims are less prone to this crime, and then beef up our law enforcement, our victim protection mechanisms, our grievance mechanisms to ensure that we protect them should the crime unfortunately take place. Like I said, I know we're going to talk more about the different specifics, so I'll leave it there. But we very much build our strategy on looking at opportunities through artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, but also being cautious on how adverse impacts can come and arise from it.
Allow me perhaps one follow-on question. His Excellency spoke a lot about some of the challenges he has in terms of implementation, especially also with regards to the emergency that Sri Lanka had some time ago. And what do you see as the main challenges for you in terms of the state of Qatar? Obviously, this is a high-income, high-capacity setting, and so what kind of challenges do you have in terms of implementing this policy?
One of the main ones, and I think that this is the case, yes, in Qatar, but in a lot of different places, is victim empowerment. Because victims for so long have been tarnished or shamed by that seal that they are a victim overall. And we're trying to not only comfort them that there are remedies for their situations and that there are protections that are in place for them, but that also to an extent we can't combat this crime without them. And their involvement not only in bringing forward traffickers, but also getting the justice that they rightly deserve. They play a massive role in it, but they haven't been empowered or protected worldwide for them to feel comfortable. And so really reaching out to either potential or current victims and ensuring that they feel empowered to come forward with their cases and to see it through till the very end is a very difficult challenge. We have managed to work on our national databases for information. So as part of my scope under the Ministry of Labor has actually established a labor market information system, which is a very intelligent database of anything to do with any activity related to labor, which includes people that move here to work, or cases of forced labor, or cases of wage protection, or wage issues, and all of which can be markers of potential cases of human trafficking. And so we've built up our national databases. We've just finished the work that we do across different agencies for sharing of information and linking of our different databases. And we've already started seeing the benefits of these systems. However, this information is very much territorial within the states of Qatar. You have different national laws when it comes with data sharing, which we understand. But one of the key challenges as well is most of this crime occurs before the victim even steps foot in the states of Qatar. And getting proper channels and sharing of information between us and other countries will always be a challenge due to the sensitivity of the topic, sensitivity of the data that we are looking for, but is also predominantly the necessary work that we need to do. So it's both on victim empowerment and having their support to be able to support them, but also on sharing of data globally or internationally to ensure that we can find the indicators, catch the cases, and have better interventions to resolve them. I would say our biggest two challenges.
Very important points. I'm sure we come back to data sharing in a second or two. I just want to move over to Kenya. And as we were talking ahead of the panel, you mentioned it's a very complex situation. Basically, Kenya is a sending country in terms of actually migrant labor, receiving country in terms of migrant labor, and also in terms of refugees, and also a transit country. And one thing that stuck with me when we had our pre-meeting was that you said it's rather complex and that the situation has evolved quite significantly over time. Maybe you can reflect on that a little bit, and also what some of the challenges are that the Republic of Kenya has in terms of addressing this.
Thank you very much. Kenya is not left behind in terms of this challenge. We have a growing population, especially the youthful population. Our population grows between 1.8 to 2% per annum. So you can imagine that population growth. And as the youth grow, they look for opportunities after graduation to get job opportunities. So they end up being lured into the wrong opportunities, and especially when they're looking for jobs beyond the boundaries of Kenya. So what we are doing as a country, we are coming up with the policies and regulations that are more stricter to ensure that we have cross-border sharing of data, because digitalization is also with us as a country. It has its good part, and then it has the challenges that come with digitalization. So as a country, we are coming up with stricter policies and laws that are going to ensure that we have synchronized our agencies so that we are coming from a very far, because initially we had over 2,000 agencies that were dealing with labor migration. But now we have brought them together under digitalization in about 700. So we have laws, stricter laws. We meet regularly in a setup that is multi-agency as a country, and we ensure that every other activity that the agencies undertake within the umbrella of the government. The Ministry of Labor chairs that committee that meets quarterly every 3 months to ensure that we ensure that we have our migration is legal. It's within the legal framework of the country. We also do a lot in terms of bilateral labor agreements that he has said. We have already signed 6. We have one with Qatar, one with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, with Germany, with the US, and we are still continuing to engage with other countries so to ensure that our youths don't land in the wrong places. As you said, Kenya is complex. It is a country of origin, of transit, and destination. People living in the north coming to the south, transit through our country. People from the Asian countries end up in Kenya. And then we have to ensure that we have cross-border collaboration so that we ensure that we have a country that abides by the migration law.
And it sounds to me like you've chosen quite an integrated strategy in terms of actually having the Ministry of Labor chairing this kind of interministerial approach. Have you seen real sort of effects in terms of how this issue is being addressed due to that sort of better integration and cooperation? Do you see this sort of difference in numbers, or how do you measure your effectiveness, as it were?
Yes, definitely. And you can attest, especially with the bilateral agreement that we have with Qatar, the numbers are rising. It is more legal, it's more engaging, so that we don't have our people getting trafficked. It's not zero. We still have a lot to do, but we think we are coming from very far, where we started and where we are today.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Alex, coming to you. I just want to really, I gave a bit of an introduction in terms of, the size of the issue that we're dealing with in terms of human trafficking, and I was just wondering if you could sort of think a little bit more about some of the global trends, and maybe also talk a little bit about, your experience of digital transformation and how it sort of impacts on the issue of human trafficking.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and I want to join my panelists in thanking the Doha Forum for highlighting this issue. It's not one that always gets the attention that it needs, but I think my first point would be that, it's just a reminder to us all that this is such a profound moral, financial, and human rights crisis that is truly global. I mean, the numbers are astounding. As you said, 28 million people in forced labor. That number has doubled in the last 25 years. And the reason I say that is because there are, in the last 25 years, amazing people working on it. There has been a lot of progress in making new policies and highlighting the issues and creating new funds like the one that I ran, new offices. And yet, we may not know how bad it would have been, but for all of that work, but we do know that it is very bad. And we are not anywhere near where we need to be in terms of combating this issue. There's an estimated, international organizations estimate between about 250 and 500 billion dollars a year made from the exploitation of people. And so it's astounding. And every person who is working on this, for every person working on it, there are probably thousands who are working to exploit people every day. And of course, millions who are being exploited. And as always, it is the poorest among us who most bear this burden. 60% of those affected, women and girls. And it is a reminder, and this panel has done a great job of showing it, that this is truly a global problem. Rich countries, poor countries, north, south, you name it, everybody needs to deal with this problem and to struggle with it. And so we are in an era where there is a clear rise in the problem. There is greater attention, more laws, but there are also falling resources going to this. There is distraction. There was a big movement around ending modern slavery and addressing forced labor. I think we can all agree that it has fallen in some ways from the headlines of where it was a couple of years ago. And of course, as a segue to what I know we want to talk about next, technology, right? Technology in many ways has always been part of the fight for and against, is that me? For and against human trafficking. Every technology is a dual-use technology. The wheel, fire, telephones, the internet, all of them are used to exploit people, and all of them are used in the fight against it. So this is not an issue that is new to the trafficking community. People have been looking at working on technology. But the thing I want to say to end, and maybe as we go into the next one, I'm always astonished people want to have panels about tech for good, right, as a sideshow. And it makes it sound like the rest of everything that tech is for is not good. And I think it's important for us to pay attention to that. The role of AI, for example, should not be first to create the world's first trillionaires and then have it trickle down usefully to the rest of the world. We should be flipping that. We should be flipping that so that our first priority for the use of technology is to end the fundamental injustices that are facing humanity, to address extreme poverty and child death and lack of access to education and health, and of course, human trafficking. I'll just end it by saying our organization, Lapis, was recognized today by the Doha Forum because of doing exactly this type of thing. We are looking at technology like AI and saying, how do we use that to reach the absolute most excluded in society? And so we created a chatbot for Afghan students banned from school so that they could have access to the best education. And they use it. We were astonished by the uptick and use of it. And so we shouldn't be afraid to really push ourselves and the leaders and the technology companies to say, first, we need to use this for justice and equality, and then you can buy your villas.
Thank you, Alex. I feel very optimistic all of a sudden, having heard your intervention there. I just wonder a little bit, Your Excellency, how this plays out in Sri Lanka. You know, how you are using new technologies within government to address these kind of issues around social justice. I mean, is this something that's current? Are you having these kind of discussions with the technology companies? Do you think that Sri Lanka has that sort of power towards the technology companies to sort of say this is what we need from technology in terms of how we operationalize this?
Yeah, as far as the present level of the technology is concerned, it has not been developed up to that level, but we strongly believe that we have the potential and the capacity. And now, so under our government, we formed a separate ministry also for digital economy. So with the aim of integration, the digital, the elements, all these operations within one ministry. So that would gradually build the situation in the future, I suppose. And just going back to again the trafficking, I would like to connect it to another dimension as well. It's not mere the battle between the legal, the migration and illegal migration. So some may argue that there is the demand or the possibility that the people will not have opportunities to migrate, maybe due to their competencies, qualification, or maybe the cost involvement. So therefore, automatically, the market may create a window for them to find illegal migrants. But this goes beyond that, because the one who engage in the trafficking for this particular purpose knows very well that they are going to use human for their betterment. The human is being used by another human to maximize his or her own interest. So it is totally unethical practice. So I just can give some examples from Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka, I just told you, there is a tendency for migration. Lots of illegal migration, migration. Now, survivors, so those who returned, have been interviewed, and the criminal investigation department also apprehended some of them. They have just found that almost 80% of them have been trafficked through, and they have been just motivated through online advertisement and these digital devices. And in most of the cases, so they have been put in the battlegrounds, and the front line, the forced labor is there in conflict areas. So the family dependents so come later on and just complain that our son or just the family members are missing, and there's somewhere there. So all those people had gone by using this the technological platforms. And another area is this drone company. Now we are just collecting information with the support of the other countries as well. So they are forced. And in the Myanmar and Thai the border, there are cyber farms as well. So where especially the women and other people are just forced for some criminal activities and even unethical behaviors, and the videos and the pornography and all those things are there. So the women out of the total migrants, 60 to 70% again, women are struggling. So I think we need to some extent integrate this technology and get the cross-border support as well, so that to some extent I think we can combat this issue, but there is some element that we need to address with some consensus or some cooperation that is beyond technology. Because when we use a technology, on the other hand, one who wants to engage in unethical practices always get the opportunity of the technology. They come out with more innovation than the government agencies.
I see your point. I just wanted to go back to, before I come to the Undersecretary, I just wanted to go to Kenya again, and in terms of Thinking about that integration that you described within government, do you also, and you mentioned global cooperation as well about this, I mean, how important is that global cooperation in terms of actually defining your strategy, in terms of gathering data, in terms of doing things jointly? You mentioned the agreement, for instance, with the state of Qatar. So could you talk a little bit about that sort of cooperation piece that I think is coming out quite strongly, that if you want to do this at a global level?
Thank you. As a country, we have a whole authority, National Employment Authority, which deals with management of migration systems, which is digitalized now. So it ensures that the data of those being offered opportunities beyond the boundaries of our country is captured. And in case of violation, you remember that I said we have very strict rules these days. We have the issue of the digital forensic investigation together with cyber crime investigations. So we share data across border, but we have a whole commission in Kenya, the Data Commission, which takes care of the data of those that are in the country, that are getting jobs, and those that are getting across the boundaries of the country.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to focus a little bit on technology for good, Undersecretary Al-Thani, because I really like that concept. I'm going to keep that. Alex, I might steal that off you. But technology for good in terms of how you're using this technology. You said you kept your powder dry a little bit in terms of some of the examples that you're using here in Qatar in terms of how you're using technology, how you're using data sharing. Could you talk a little bit more in specifics for that? I'm just thinking about some people in the audience might be sort of thinking about their own strategies and their own approaches.
Yes, so I briefly touched upon our labor market information system, but just to give a little bit more detail around this, it's not simply just administrative data from the Ministry of Labor. It includes different immigration data of people that have entered and exited the country, the reason that they're there. It includes information in terms of, from the central bank, of wage payments and the movement of money there. It also includes different individuals that are associated with entities or other individuals in terms of transactions. At first, it was a very simple database that had statistics, but later on we started deploying different emerging technologies, integrating graph theory, for example, to look at different relationships between elements that exist within our data. And it really started to identify certain illicit practices within the labor market, illicit practices in terms of recruitment, and it allowed us the space to be able to intervene and take action. Policy takes time, and I'm sure that first of all, anyone in any government that claims that policies can be quick and effective immediately, I'd like to challenge and have a discussion with, and learn from potentially if they're true to their word. But policy takes time, and things that take time require immediate interventions and actions on the ground. And data really enables us to drive some of those interventions in action. Now, on a national level, like I mentioned, we've been able to successfully achieve that, and now we're piloting the specific database for human trafficking that hopefully will allow us to see even more and identify and pick up on different elements. But as I briefly mentioned as well, this crime is not territorial within the state of Qatar only, and it requires more. I think that my colleague from Kenya mentioned the difficult situation or nuanced situation in Kenya. In Qatar, if you look at it purely from a geographical perspective, we have one land border, and that would make it seem simple. But we also have a massive transit hub in our airport that sees millions and millions that fly across. And in different human trafficking routes will almost certainly have to pass by Hamad International Airport, being the transit hub that it is. So thankfully, through the work of different flight carriers, massive partner to the National Committee for Combating Human Trafficking is the Qatar Airways, but there have been others as well. In communication with other countries, we've managed to identify cases before they even come, and in certain instances even managed to intervene with victims while they were here in Doha. But that's only possible through connecting different databases and information and sharing of information, which is very difficult. But also, we utilize emerging technologies to help develop our strategies on what to look out for, what are the emerging trends, what are the things that we need to keep an eye out for in terms of different markers, but that's happening elsewhere in the world. Because it's almost guaranteed that given the interconnectivity of the entire globe at this point, that something that happens in a country far, far away, something that happens in Sri Lanka or in Kenya, will have an impact here in Qatar and on these cases. So using technology to help create more agile and developing strategies is also important. I think one of the first people I met when I joined the Ministry of Labor told me, he's like, listen, the criminal is 10 steps ahead of you. By the time you've implemented your policies, they've moved on to the next thing. But we're starting to close that 10-year gap using emerging technologies. As you mentioned, technology for good, even though I took it to be negative from your end, but we'll go with the theme a little bit here.
I'll challenge Alex in a
All right,
second.
perfect. I'll leave that to you. But it's breaking, kind of reducing that 10-year gap so that we are able to better activate and deploy interventions, using it as really a powerful enabler for our activities. It does have the negative sides. Everyone seems to be trying to keep it on a little bit on the positive, and I'll maintain that theme with some minor, deflection from it. But the core of it is good. I agree, and we can utilize it. But also, it makes victims more prone to these activities. I'm not going in terms of hypotheticals. We've seen cases that have nothing to do with Qatar, but are happening to residents here in Qatar because of false advertisement, deepfakes, and different things that recruit, let's say, certain victims to be trafficked elsewhere. And it's not easy to catch these. They multiply, they come out in different forms. It's hard to monitor and try to combat those. The real work that we've been trying to focus on is in raising awareness and in building people's capacity to be able to identify and kind of assess the content that they are consuming, but it is difficult. So while we talk about all the positive sides, we must very much be not only aware, but also put our efforts towards combating some of the negative effects. The interconnectivity is great in a lot of different fields and ways, but it also makes individuals more prone to falling into this trap.
Thank you very much, and I guess that's the dual use that you highlighted there, Alex. Just want to challenge you a little bit on the technology for good, because it didn't sound entirely optimistic what you said. But I just want to talk a little bit more about the opportunities that exist with this new technology, and I think we heard some elements of that, I think, from the other panelists in terms of what that could look like: data sharing, this sort of data mining, all these kind of approaches, maybe even disrupting some of the social media recruitment that we've been talking about. So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, my negativity is that I want tech for good to be redundant. I want it to be so that when you say tech, people think, oh, it's going to be used for a good purpose. You know, as opposed to a sideshow conversation. I think that there are really three areas, and I think that the panelists have already highlighted them, that I like to think about. There's data, there is coordination and enforcement, and I think my personal favorite, which is personal empowerment. So maybe I'll just give a quick example of each one. On the data side, I mean, truly, people are doing such interesting and entrepreneurial things right now. And I think that we need to do more to unleash that. There are things like predictive analytics that are being done. When in my previous job, we had a project, for example, for Bangladesh. And it did something very interesting. It took labor records, I think maybe somewhat similar to what Undersecretary Al-Thani was saying. It took labor records and mixed them with textile export records to create flags so that if the labor records did not match the amount of labor required to produce the textiles that were being exported, this could create a flag for labor inspectors. Now, it's not going to solve the problem, but it does allow law enforcement, inspectors to be able to better target who they're looking at. Similarly, in Brazil, in both the coffee industries and the charcoal industries, able to use geospatial data to see where rainforests were being destroyed for coffee plantations and creation of charcoal, which are industries rife with forced labor, again, to be able to help law enforcement to prioritize, to better understand where things are happening, and to better utilize their resources. And these things are amazing tools, but they are only useful if they are matched by actual government capacity and will to go ahead and use them to tackle the problem. So both are necessary. The technology is never going to be able to solve the problems on its own. At a global level, we're seeing interesting things in coordination. There's something called the Traffic Analysis Hub, which is doing a data aggregation approach from NGOs and business and law enforcement, again, to try to create sort of maps of ecosystems. It's not going to find a particular perpetrator on a particular day, but it allows us to better understand the trends, who's doing what, and ultimately how to best combat it. And on the personal empowerment, I think that there's really interesting things going on. The first, I love ethical recruiting, right? A lot of this problem in trafficking comes from recruitment and recruitment firms that lie to people, that take people's passports, that tell them when they've arrived in the country, suddenly they owe them $10,000 and visa fees and housing and so on, and they end up working for 2 years and never pay off their debt. This is a very common problem. So why not disrupt this industry in a couple of ways? Ethical recruitment agencies are starting to pop up. That's one great thing, not necessarily technology, but a great idea. But there are also apps that are being put in the hands of people who are in the communities that are most heavily drawn upon so that they can better understand what risks there are. You know, we educate kids in school about health. Why not educate kids in school and young adults in the communities that are being most heavily affected by trafficking about their rights and the things to look out for? Because we know there are a lot of patterns in these things. Another example of these is, of course, as somebody mentioned, countering disinformation, right? There is so much going on out there about disinformation that's involved in sexual exploitation, that's involved in forced labor. There's a lot more we can do to both empower people, make them better aware so that they are able to encounter information and discern when it's bad, but also countering that with accurate information. And then a good old-fashioned technology, hotlines, right? Give people the ability to reach out and say when they fear they are being exploited, when they are being exploited, or when they hear about somebody else being exploited. So often law enforcement simply does not get the information in a timely fashion. And we've got to improve the usage of those. And importantly, they have to go somewhere where people are confident that the information is going to be safe.
Thank you, Alex. We're getting close to the end of this panel, but I want to give the opportunity to some of you in the audience to ask some questions. And before you ask your question or make your comment, could you please identify who you are? Is there a microphone?
Thank you very much. Professor Andrew McLeod, King's College London. One comment about technology for bad, which we can resolve, and one technology for good. On the bad front, we're running a program where women have been trafficked into sex crimes, and we've found a lot of it has been driven by predator and prey linked together on social media, particularly on Facebook. Question, we were able to map out with pen and paper over a couple of weeks a network of predators and a network of prey and potential prey, and can we develop an AI algorithm and then criminalise the social media companies for linking predator and prey? So it can be a negative. And then a positive directly linked with Kenya. Linked to this, we've found in cases where there has been sex trafficking, where the woman has become pregnant, we've now developed a DNA technology where we take DNA from the child, isolate the father's side of the DNA, traffic them through genetic genealogy, find the father and hold them to account. And Esther will talk later, but we got 17 court orders in Britain last week against soldiers and the British Army Training Unit UK in Nanyuki, holding men to account finally, who thought they got away with it by impregnating women. We need to scale this program up using technology so Kenya can finally get their justice from the British.
Thank you for that comment and intervention. And we have a question or comment over there. And again, if you could tell us your name and your affiliation.
Yes, my name's Helen Mountfield. I'm from Oxford University. I'm also a judge of the Qatar International Court. And the Qatari state pays for an international court, which has very good labour standards for any foreign worker in this country. I don't think free to use. But I don't think that this kind of workers who we're talking about who are trafficked would even know about this court. It may be that it could be part of foreigners coming in through immigration in this country, that they get given details of that court and how to apply to it, which can be done electronically. Because I think access to justice is one of the great questions for people without power in these situations.
Absolutely.
Just very briefly on this point. So we, as the National Committee for Combating Human Trafficking, we've worked a lot with the Supreme Judicial Council in Qatar, who are members of our national committee. And in about the last couple of years, they've established a specific court for human trafficking cases that tries those cases. Recently, as well as the committee, we've signed agreements with different law firms in the state of Qatar to offer pro bono support, because the access to justice element, it's one thing to have the place for them to go, but to have the resources to be able to take these cases forward has been a real challenge. And we are finalizing a project to support them during their time of asking for justice for the cases through our Workers' Support and Insurance Fund that's expanding its strategy to incorporate more than just different labor disputes within their support window. So I agree with you, they might not know about the international court that's available, but they do have alternatives in the national judicial system through the specialized courts for human trafficking, through the 5 specialized labor committees, which are basically 5 different courts they can go to for different cases in terms of labor abuses. So there's a lot of different streams for them. We're working in terms of enhancing and raising awareness for where people can access justice. I think that is part of what you mentioned in terms of the hotlines and accessing those. There is a hotline, but there's not much. Let's say the calls don't match the different individuals that might have cases. We also have an online system where they can file these complaints or tip us off to the case of others that is accessible from all over the world and doesn't really require a lot of identifying information from the individuals in an attempt to allow them or to empower them to come forward with more cases. If I may, I know that this is not directly to this question, but to challenge this one, not challenge, but to add to a point that you made towards the end about exploitation through fair recruitment measures. One of the things that sometimes the victims are willing to sign on as victims because of the situation and the cases in the countries or the situations that they are trying to escape. And so the case of fair and ethical recruitment has to go beyond the kind of awareness of individuals of their rights and responsibilities towards the recruitment process that they're going into. It also needs to provide them with the support, and this goes back to what Your Excellency said in the beginning, in terms of having a better social justice everywhere reduces the kind of the victims, the victim falling into the trap of human trafficking in general. Because we've seen cases where people from conflict zones willingly sign on to different pathways by traffickers. They know there's no job where they're going. They know they need to pay all of this money, and they know that they will be victims of human trafficking, but they still do it willingly. So making them recognize that what's happening is potentially illicit is not enough to kind of cover all of the different elements, which is a challenge I don't have an answer to. I just pose challenges, apparently, but it's a big issue.
Thank you very much. Any final questions or comments? Stunned silence. So thank you very, very much. I want to thank the panelists for this session. I feel that 45 minutes is probably not enough to do a topic of this magnitude and of this difficulty justice. And I think we touched upon some of these issues around global cooperation in terms of what we can do with data sharing, in terms of country cooperation, how countries set themselves up, also what high and low capacity countries can do, the opportunities of technology or the good side of technology, and also the dual use aspect of that and the complexity of all these issues. We spoke about justice, spoke about very specific aspects around testing and so on. So it was a very rich discussion and certainly things that we need to discuss further after this panel. But first and foremost, I want to thank our panelists for their contributions. I very much enjoyed this conversation, enjoyed exploring this topic with you.